Hello everyone, my name is Holly Rose O'Connor. I'm in Cap 4 and this is my audio file to go alongside my digital portfolio, which is a condensed version of my sketchbooks. So in the first page you have a picture of one of James Ensor's paintings, who dealt with the macabre in a very light and soft-hearted way. His colour palette is something that I was really interested in and I really value, because I appreciate combining somewhat darker themes with much lighter colours in an attempt to create a bit of an illusion of false naivety. In the second photo, you can see some ceramic masks that I've made in an attempt to conceptualise my ideas surrounding masking and autism, especially masking in autism in women, which is something that they do very often as a means of coping within society, but that will be discussed later. But the material of the ceramic and the masks was deliberate here, just because I wanted to explore heaviness and the soft colours and the fact that these masks could be gentle looking and soft looking, but they're also quite hard and they would be a heavy burden to bear if they were to be worn. Next is a photo of a cutout from Zadie Shah's exhibition. She works predominantly in costume, and she also paints a lot. She paints on sculptures, she paints on clothes, she paints on canvas. That's her medium basically, and her work focuses a lot on folklore, Korean folklore, and basically working with ways of using contemporary art to create a narrative and to embrace narrative. This inspired me to continue with cutouts ideas. So in the next picture, my Let Me Be Tender clouds were what I submitted for my the back show. I was quite proud of this work. It was quite difficult to make, but it was an outcome regardless. I like the idea of the performative aspect, how tenderness and performance go hand in hand in my work, in terms of stimming and maladaptive daydreaming, which I'll get into in a minute. But the next picture is my Disabling Disability in Pursuit of the Emancipation of Neurodivergent Artists dissertation. So this was the front cover that I created. The little stars on the front they're in the shape of a infinity sign, which is the symbol of neurodiversity, and the stars are also actually neurons, and I just thought that was quite a cool thing to do. The next page I have me exploring what neurodiversity is and the ideas that I want to explore more. So I've got masking, which I discussed briefly just there. It's a way of keeping up with neurotypical standards. Stimming is self-soothing repetitive movements, speaking the same thing and repeating the same thing over and over again in an attempt to calm oneself, especially when you're neurodivergent. Expectations that neurotypical people have on neurodivergent people and what it can actually do to them, and ways of coping in a neurotypical world. What I explore in the work further is disassociation and daydreaming, in particular maladaptive daydreaming, which is daydreaming in a form of not coping and escapism. I go on to talk about materialism, in particular Marxist dialectical materialism, but in this page in particular I am talking about materialism as a whole, as a concept on its own, and how our material conditions affect us directly, not that we affect our material conditions. So what material conditions that we live in at the time will directly impact our lives. In this case, our material conditions as neurodivergent people aren't great, to say the least. After coming out of COVID, where people all of a sudden were allowed to work at home when they weren't able to cope with COVID, it was acceptable because the neurotypical norm was being put at risk. But when it comes to neurodivergent people, or disabled people in general, those changes aren't going to happen as easily. So there is that. I also had a wee look at objects and materiality of the object. I was looking at Mao projects, which are a small business who make artful ceramics. They make them look very organic in form, often non-functional objects, and their colour choices are very much what I like in my own colour palette. Very pastel-y, very soft, and again, very organic in form. Neurodiversity and the concept of usefulness within society, or the concept of brokenness or being defective. I wanted to try and explore how we see neurodivergent people, and how it could be systems put in place that enforce these kind of hegemonic norms onto us. So then underneath I was looking at the Neo-Neanderthals exhibition that I seen in 2019. This exhibition had a big impact on me when I seen it, but it had a big impact on this project also, because I was very interested in the concept of the imagined space, or the imagined place and world that one might find themselves slipping into during the maladaptive daydream. Could that have artifacts? Could that have things attached to it? So then I was having a little look at nooks and places that you can crawl into and kind of feel safe. So I just have an image of a tree with a hole in it, because that's kind of what a nook is by definition. But in this sense, when I'm talking about nooks, and in my sketchbooks when I'm talking about nooks, I mean more specifically safe spaces and safe places that neurodivergent people can feel safe to be neurodivergent in without being subjected to the neurotypical gaze. I then wanted to explore the whole Neo-Neanderthals thing a bit further, because I wanted to see if I could create some sort of suit or some sort of thing that you have to wear, or garment, to have to go to this non-existing place that is the place or the paracosm that exists within your mind. I then started looking at some of the mechanisms. I started looking at spacesuits and how they actually are made and how they function. And I also started to make my own costume. I was quite interested in the fact that spacesuits are made to mimic earthly conditions. I wanted to explore that a bit more, because what if earthly conditions are hell on earth for neurodivergent people? Often things like sensory overload, etc., etc. So I made the outfit, and I also made the helmet. The outfit was made from scratch, but I was playing around with in my drawings with the materials and see how I could make it. The helmet I made from scratch also, from a template that I got, and I also made the visor too. I then wanted to move away from this idea a little bit, so I started looking at Lubina Hamid's work, where she has her cutouts in the space, and they're quite theatrical and they tell a story, and that kind of brought me back to the whole cutouts thing and going back to theatrics and maybe wanting to move away from the kind of science fiction-y side of things. So I was then looking at landscapes and these kind of fictional landscapes that exist within children's cartoons and books and stuff. This is from the images I have here of mountains here underneath Lubina Hamid's work. They're from the Moomins, and it was something I really liked when I was young. Underneath that, I took a bit of inspiration from Tai Shani. I took a lot of inspiration from Tai Shani. Not only her installations for considering things like cutouts, but also her piece where there is fabric draped over this kind of ghost-like figure, but it's not fabric. It's obviously some sort of plaster or hard material to be in the fountain. So then that got me thinking about fabric and using fabric for perhaps some sort of performance where I could be spinning as an imitation of what stimming is like. So for me, when I was younger, stimming was spinning around in circles. So I kind of chucked the whole astronaut thing out the window and started to use material that was a lot softer and a lot more flowy for this reason. I also wanted to consider the possibility of wearing a mask during this performance of me spinning around, but I wasn't sure exactly what to have until I remembered the kind of geometric shapes that I've kind of used a lot in my work, including like my inspiration from Tai Shani, who uses a lot of kind of geometric shapes in her work also, like perfectly round circles that are really deep dark colours. So after that, it was time to decide what exactly were the cutouts going to be, now that I'd kind of shifted from one idea to the other. At first I was considering the concept of being lost in the woods, just when you're considering coping within a world that, you know, doesn't really welcome you. You feel like you're kind of lost, you feel you're trying to find the light, trying to find the exit or whatnot. So that's when I came up with the idea of having cutouts in lots of trees that you can wind between. Then I was considering the idea of home, and it's something that I've used in my work a lot, the little cartoon-ish or dollhouse looking-ish homes, because I was led on to think about like cabins in the woods and then safety and then home. And then I was considering the possibility of having an exhibition where you look inside the home of someone or someone or something, and the home is where their privacy is being invaded by the neurotypical gaze while they're stimming. I was then starting to look at mountainous landscapes. Mountains are kind of something I've also used quite a lot of in my work. Just because they generally represent escapism quite well. They help create landscape really nicely, especially in painting. So I made a little drawing here to see what kind of cutouts I could make. Could I make them, suspended? Were they all going to be on the floor? What about the geometric shapes? I had the black circle in the middle, etc., etc. It was then time to make the video with Fergus, which came out to be a big success. The results of it were absolutely beautiful, and I think the video being finished actually helped me with decision making in terms of choosing colour and stuff like that. So then I started to think about editing the video and how the video would be projected. I'd established, after talking to Maya, that I should have the video projected onto like a bigger like the wall that was further away from the door, just so that the light wasn't shining in people's eyes and it wasn't, too separated from the work. So I did that, and I managed to edit the video into a circle, which reminded me a lot of the paintings by Rebecca Chaperon. And I've got a picture of Rebecca going into the void that I painted in my room. But so the paintings by her they reminded me of these voids that I like using in my work as well. And these big black kind of spaces that are taken up, that kind of absorb everything around them, like an actual black hole. So, and in terms of choosing text, I decided on where did you go, and I'm right here, things like that, with the text, like almost like the room is talking to itself, like the two sides of the room are having a conversation with each other. But in my head, that's meant to kind of represent, the kind of real material world and the dream maladaptive world that the room itself actually is. And these questions are coming from the black hole, and it's abrupt and it's loud. So that concludes this very, very brief description of the process that I've gone through. It might not be the most cohesive or the most elaborate, but I do have struggles with waffling. So I hope you've enjoyed, and